Today's episode is with Josh Pyorre.
They are your threat research team. But either way, they if they're thinking ahead, I've in many cases just been analyzing malware, looking for an organization, and you aren't doing some kind of threat hunting focused on what your business is focused on. Threat hunting narrows your focus on what you have to worry about. You're acting like nothing's going to happen to you, and then all of a sudden you get ransomware on your system, and then you're fighting that.
Investing in proactive would also help so that you don't get into the fire in a way.
I feel the job itself and the work is creative, and I feel like any work in the world is creative. You could do anything. I'm always trying to find ways to increase the work I can do so I can focus on what's more important to me. Things more, I don't think it's going to take our jobs. I think it's going to make it so that we can have more opportunities they have guardrails in place. You can say to ChatGPT, I'm using them as an example, there's tons of it, but it was a small company that was compromised. And in many cases, I've seen law firms compromised. These are just...
Hi everyone, this is Purushottam and thanks for tuning into ScaletoZero Podcast. Today's episode is with Josh Pyorre. Josh is a security research engineering technical leader with Cisco Talos. Been in security since 2000, working as a researcher and an analyst at organizations such as Cisco, NASA, Mandiant, and various nonprofits as well. And was also a principal product manager for advanced threat protection at Zscaler. He has presented at many conferences like DEF CON, RSA, B-Sides, and many more. He's also the host and producer of the security podcast Root Access. And you can find more information about him at about his personal from his personal website, which is biosec.com. So, Josh, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming. For our audience, do you want to briefly share about your journey?
Sure. Yeah. Like you mentioned, I've been in security for a while. I started out the very beginning doing tech support, field service engineer, help desk things, and then sysadmin. And then I can't remember when the .com bust happened, but that happened. I was out of work for a little while, and then I got a job as a technical director for a nonprofit. So I did that for quite a while for a homeless shelter in San Francisco. And then that moved me towards security. It was like I should learn Python, I should learn all these things. And then I answered an ad on Craigslist of all places for a job. Ended up being at NASA, which was pretty cool. So I got to be one of the first two analysts in their new SOC in Ames Research Center, where I learned a bunch of stuff looking at the fire hose of IDS data. And then from then on, I just kept moving forward with working in incident response at Mandiant and working in product management briefly, working with Cisco and working for myself too as well in some cases there. And then I love to teach and speak at conferences, so I'm always researching something that I can speak about.
Lovely. That's quite a unique journey. And I've never seen or heard anyone getting a security job from Craigslist. That's very unique.
It didn't actually say NASA. It just I was like, oh, this looks really interesting. So I, applied, and then they contacted me, and I was like, oh, NASA. It wasn't a civil servant job. It was a contractor job, as most government jobs are, but it was still pretty cool.
So you mentioned like you have done many things throughout your career and you have been doing. So what does a day in your life look like today?
Hectic. I usually I try to have a good work-life balance. I think I do, actually. I have family, so I spend time with them in the morning, and then it's changed with the nature of my jobs, but currently I'm doing a lot of more focus on data science, security, data science to support security things in my day job.
Okay.
And then, of course, if I'm researching something, I'm often doing that in the middle of work because it's tied to work, or I'm doing it outside of work, like after hours. So maybe when work's over at 5 or 6 p.m., I have family time, and then they all go to bed, and I stay up till 2 a.m. working on something, depending on what I'm doing. And I try to throw in some other things too, like exercise, and I have a sauna. I go in the sauna, things like that. But it seems that the days have a regular cadence to them, but to me, they also seem a little bit chaotic.
Sounds like everyone's day nowadays, with multiple focus areas. So, and one of the things you mentioned multiple times, which is around research, right? And that's the topic for today, like threat hunting or security research and
Hmm.
security at startups. So let's dive in. So we hear about cyber attacks or cyber threats on a daily basis. And these attacks span from simpler ones like phishing attacks all the way to sophisticated like ransomware or crypto mining attacks. So in order to prevent these, organizations generally spend time on building threat research team or security research team. So to set the stage for our audience, can you provide a brief overview what threat research or security research or threat hunting is?
Yeah, sure. So I feel like one part of that question, that organizations set up threat hunting or security research teams. Hopefully they do. Sometimes actually there's more of an industry now of you can hire a company. So like most companies they are your threat research team. But either way, they if they're thinking ahead, they're setting up their threat hunting and security research. Usually threat hunting is the first thing they would set up, I would think, because they want to look for future threats to their organization that may be coming down. When I was at NASA, for example, I would look at all the phishing emails that came in for the entire agency and try to find trends based on that.
Mhm.
So that could be counted as threat hunting. I've, in many cases, just been analyzing malware, looking for correlations between different malware variants and trying to find just relationships. And then when you combine that with looking at what's happening in the world, so you can kind of you
Mhm.
try to make predictions, like predict the future. Basically, that's what threat hunting generally entails. And ultimately, your product that you are releasing as a threat hunter is IOCs or things you can block or things you can watch or sinkhole or whatever. And then security research, I feel, is a broader term. It's kind of maybe it's harder to define, but I mean it's research. You know, I didn't go to I did 8 years in community college, but so I have a PhD in community college, but I don't have any degree of any kind. So I didn't do full on research, but I do it now with my work and my own passions and interests. And doing security research, you're exploring things that are
Mhm.
maybe hypothetical or outside the bounds of normal, whatever. And threat hunting can fuel that, I think. I don't, that was a kind of long answer, but
Okay. No, no, it makes sense. Like it makes sense that you narrowed it down to threat hunting, and that's where organizations should start and then slowly grow. And one of the things which I did not know is that even you can hire or work with external agencies for your own threat hunting or threat research as well. A follow up
that's the easiest
question
way to get
to
spin up real quick. Sorry. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Go
interesting.
ahead.
A follow up question to the why is it important for organizations in the context of let's say cybersecurity or cloud security?
I think it's important because you need to know what you're at risk for and what to watch out for. If you are an organization and you aren't doing some kind of threat hunting focused on what your business is focused on, um, you might be just reacting to everything that you see around you. You might be uh, assuming that the newest whatever variant of malware is going to affect you, and maybe it's not even close to your industry, or you have to worry about it. Threat hunting narrows your focus on what you have to worry about, and
Mhm.
uh, it also keeps you aware of just what's out there against you, basically, and also predicts the future. Like you're not chasing after things. You're looking forward and looking toward things that might be coming down.
Okay. So it's understanding the current challenges and also looking at sort of predicting what might happen to the organization in future.
Yeah.
Uh, so in cybersecurity, there are several approaches, right, when it comes to threat research, like proactive or reactive. How does
Hmm.
these approaches differ from each other?
Oh, yeah. So I guess I started to touch on that a little bit. But
Hmm.
a lot of organizations I've worked for in the past, not when they weren't security organizations, were primarily reactive, and I would say a lot of the industry is reactive, unless they're going out and starting their own threat hunting teams and researcher teams or hiring someone.
Hmm.
But reactive, of course, you're putting out fires all the time, and it's very stressful. And
Right.
you're acting like nothing's going to happen to you, and then all of a sudden you get ransomware in your system, and then you're fighting that, and then you move forward, you remediate that, and then the next thing comes down. And of course, proactive. We all want to be proactive with everything, Just like you're driving down the road, you want to pay attention to what's going to come towards you. You don't want to just react to people hitting you in the car. I feel like
Mhm.
it's common sense that you would be proactive with anything you do, especially threat research, threat hunting, to keep your business and organization and individual self safe, basically.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So now let's say as an organization, there are benefits to both, right? And as you said, like often organizations spend more time on the reactive method because uh, you see the fire and you start fixing it. Now,
Mm-hmm.
what challenges have you seen with organizations adopting either strategies, and what benefits have you seen from that?
Well, I've typically seen smaller organizations, they do the reactive one, unfortunately. With a little bit of proactive, like usually in terms of the most common things of like securing their firewall and securing their systems a little bit. Um, uh, yeah, but the large organizations will, of course, be a little more proactive. But we all, I think in the security industry, it's commonly known that security in many times comes last in the budget, unfortunately,
Yeah.
and it doesn't appear. And you look at the news, and places are being ransomed, places are being having the data stolen, and there are
Mhm.
things that they could have done way in advance. And so, yeah,
So that's where like there is clear differentiation. Like investing in proactive would also help so that you don't get into the fire in a way. Of course, you need to have
yeah,
reactive approaches as well. But
you
yeah,
do.
proactive does help.
Yeah, it's an investment. It's like investing in insurance, but it's more important, I'd
Mhm.
say, because it's going to happen. It's going to happen if you leave your systems exposed, they're going to be found.
So one of the things you mentioned earlier was around that it's a vast area, right? Like security research or threat research. Compared to traditional security research, it needs a mindset shift. So how do you use creativity in the cybersecurity threat research area?
Oh yeah, I think about this all the time because I come from a creative background. I'm an artist. I make music. I'm more than just a security researcher and practitioner. But I feel the job itself and the work is creative, and I feel like any work in the world is creative. You could do anything and find creativity in
Mhm.
it. There are rules. There are certain rules like that you have to follow, but inside those rules, there's ways you can move around, and you can. It's kind of hard to explain exactly how creative you can be creative because it's a mindset that I have. But when I'm faced with a problem, I have so many options to explore, and they're outside the usual boxes that I work with. The boxes are great, and they're things that other people created once at one point that were creative and outside the box. But there's always room to explore even more. So I just
Mhm.
find creativity like a creative approach, an artistic approach, a humanistic approach is to
Mhm.
doing security is important. There's still the technical things, you got to set your whatever correctly and your rules correctly and all this stuff and set up your IDSs correctly and all these things. But there are when you're researching something, there's there's room for exploration.
Right. Um, that makes a lot of sense that you are sort of combining your creative knowledge and then using that for such a technical topic as well, right? So, can you share maybe a
Mhm.
specific instance where you have thought differently or you have thought it in a creative way and that has helped you identify a threat or fix a threat?
That's tough because I've always approached things this way. So I would say almost everything I do is approached via creative processes. I mean, it's very rare that I'm doing basic like data entry kind of things. And even then I'll write a Python script to do it faster for me. But I can think in the industry there are some methods where creative play or creative practice has been used in security. I think probably in terms of like attribution identification when you're looking at something like an attack chain of a phishing email comes in with some attachment or whatever, and it leads to a
Mm-hmm.
compromise. There's a whole attack chain, and they're pretty standard across the board. Like they have to do a certain couple of things, and this is shown in the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And the MITRE ATT&CK framework is attempt to put um, like definitions on each of those parts of the attack chain. But there's also
Mhm.
behaviors, and it also follows behaviors. But trying to find, when you're researching different malware variants and using the MITRE ATT&CK rule set and other things related to that, to find relationships between malware variants and their attack chain activity, um, uh, and then attributing it to some threat actor or group is is a creative
Mhm.
process. I mean, when you look through the code and you're finding the variables that match with the variables of the other code and some other malware variant, or just looking at the hosting infrastructure or whatever, you can kind of explore basically. It's not
Mhm.
so follow the rules, and you end up with a result of like, hey, this group in whatever country did this, which is interesting.
Yeah, so you mentioned quite a few areas, right? Like, let's say you just gave an example. Let's say if we get a phishing email, what is it exploiting? What is it attack chain? Look at the MITRE framework to understand what
Mhm.
areas is it impacting. You mentioned about writing Python scripts and stuff like that. So you touched
Yeah.
on many tools which threat researchers use. So now, one question that comes to mind is, often new technology brings new tools and ideas, right, for threat research. And along with that comes challenges. And recently, there is an introduction of Gen AI, and
Mhm.
a lot of folks are adopting it. And it's helping secure, like there are two angles to it, right? One is, yeah, the researchers can use generative AI platforms to learn from it, and the other area is that generative AI integration is getting can get attacked as well, right? So how do you envision generative AI playing a role in security research as there is rise in adoption of Gen AI?
Oh yeah, I well, I love it. I'm hoping that it doesn't go. It doesn't. I don't know where it's going to go. I just, but right now, like it's helped me quite a bit. Like I deal with a lot of different technologies, and things are changing, and quite often in the different technologies I work with. Like I use some data science
Mhm.
things, and I use Python quite a bit. In many cases, I mean, I'm not. I don't know all of Python from my memory, so it's nice to be able to say,
True.
write me a script that will take care of this little thing. And I'm always trying to find ways to increase the work I can do so I can focus on what's more important to me. So
Mhm.
I personally use it. In my last recent talk I just gave, um, a, a presentation, I did a lot of using like ChatGPT and some other language models to help me write some of the code, some of the more complex code. So I was able to do it in 2 months, whereas it would have taken me 6 months instead. Um,
Yeah.
so that's really helpful, basically. And I think it's going to improve things more. I don't think it's going to take our jobs. I think it's going to make it so that we can have more opportunities to create more detection mechanisms and be better security practitioners.
I'm glad you said that, hey, we are not going to lose our jobs, because quite a few folks think that, hey, after the chat GPT or the Gen AI
Hmm.
systems, are we going to lose our jobs? um, so that is one area, right? You highlighted that, hey, you are getting benefit out of it. Now, how do you
Hmm.
see this becoming a challenge for researchers?
Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, we've already seen instances where the text of phishing emails are better written, better well written.
Mhm. Yeah.
Previously, you could always be like, "Oh, this is obviously phishing or spam or whatever." But now, you can, if you don't speak English, you can paste whatever you want in there, and it'll rewrite it for you, and then it'll rewrite it again. You can say, "Rewrite it as this kind of person,"
Yeah.
and it'll rewrite it like that
True.
person. Or you can make your own AI agent that is a certain kind of personality, and it's just going to get harder for us. Like I've always prided myself whenever I've gotten the phishing tests or actual phishing emails. I'm like, oh, I can always find it. I look at the headers, I look at all sorts of things, and I have an intuition for it. But there recently, in the last year or so, and really the stuff has come about the last year, there's been a couple that almost got me, and that's just one example. But you could they have guardrails in place. You can say to ChatGPT, I'm using them as an example. There's tons of them, but you could say, I want write me some thing to exploit this vulnerability, and it'll say I can't do that, but you can get around that really easily with different kind of
Yeah.
prompts. And you can also, I even run one on my machine. I run a large language model on my machine, and I can ask anything I want. So there's no real guardrail. So I feel like the
Yeah.
sky's the limit. The threat actors are doing the same thing that we're doing, and they're as creative. They're more creative, I think, than we are because we're bound by rules in many cases. So they'll do whatever they
Yeah.
can to get past the whatever. So a
Hmm.
little bit scary.
And you are spot on. Like I was also, I think I asked a simple question like, what are all the attack vectors in AWS? And I got a response that hey,
Hmm.
I can, as a large language model, I cannot give you this information and all of that. But if you slightly tweak the question, it starts giving you different information, different attack vectors also. So yeah, even though there are guardrails, there is ways to work around it. And another thing, that a key thing that you highlighted, is if you're running the large language model on your own machine, then there are no guardrails, right? You can ask any question, you can get
Oh
any
yeah,
answer. Yeah.
and
So
I can
that
additionally
that
tie in
sounds.
Python or yeah, I can tie
True.
in my programming to whatever it is on the machine, and I can have it automatically rewriting my code as I'm working on it, or rewriting whatever it is I'm doing, or recreating whatever I'm doing. And then you can go even
Yeah.
further. I don't want to take us on a tangent, but you can go further with like, that's just coding. I mean, there's of course deep fake stuff and changing voices and
Mhm.
impersonating people. And personally, it's already been used with phone calls to people to try to get money from people saying I'm in trouble, and it's they hear their son or daughter on the phone, and it's actually just
Yeah.
AI kind of thing. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's the sort of, with this new technology, there is a lot of benefit we can gain, and at the same time, there are these risk vectors, right, which are coming into our,
mhm.
us as well. And
Yeah.
folks like you are spending a lot of time doing research how we can get around it. So there is that balance has to be kept in check, right? Otherwise, we'll be in trouble in
Hmm.
a way.
Yeah.
So I know that you present at many conferences, and your conference talks are uh, often you show unconventional approaches to security. How do you balance presenting complex security topics and make them accessible to a diverse audience?
Well, I'm fortunate because I did all that work in my early years as help desk and tech support. And so I had to guide
Ah.
any kind of user or person through complex topics. And I had to be
Mhm.
nice about it and not talk down to them. So and then as you get further along in your career, you learn to speak professionally to people and to work in a way that is like you can convey your information. So it's a learned thing, but it's easy. It's so easy in my line of work, especially currently what I'm doing with the data science stuff. I'm in a silo. I'm like in my computer, like head down in my computer, trying to work through some problem, and then. But I like to get out and talk to people so I can distill that information and explain it to a broad audience. So anyway, I'll take a complex topic and I will uh, break it down to like what's the problem I'm trying to solve, and then give some answers of what I'm working towards in a simple way. But I don't want to talk in a way that makes the audience feel like I'm belittling them. Of course, I mean I'm I'm always open for questions, So sometimes I do have to show in my presentations code, videos of code
Mhm.
running, or actually the screens of code because there's no other way to explain it. But I'll walk through it, and I try to make it as friendly and easy as possible. While also making it easier for the people who are super technical who get it right away to not be bored. So it's a weird balancing act, very tricky.
Yeah, 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 true. Um, one last question that I wanted to ask, and often this happens with like enterprises, they have the funding, the resources to invest in security, threat research, all of these areas, right? Um, Small, when it comes to small businesses or even non-profits, you have worked at non-profits as well. Why do you think it's crucial that the entire ecosystem, security ecosystem, should also prioritize security of the smaller businesses or nonprofits?
Oh yeah, so I think about this a lot, having worked at well as businesses, and then also working in environments where companies hire the company I work for to remediate something or fix something. Like you look at like big corporations, big companies can afford the security services that are provided. And I've
Mhm.
worked at a couple security places, or a few of them that have consistently raised their prices and removed lower tier offerings that they used to have when they first started out. But they removed them
Mhm.
because they wanted better quality clients. Clients that will just pay the huge amount and leave them alone for the most part. But the uh, so it kind of outprices these smaller businesses. And when you look at like
Mhm.
most of the compromises that have happened, like I think it was Merck that this happened. That
Mhm.
they had an accounting firm, MeEDoc, was compromised, and an update was Trojaned, and that's what caused their whole systems to shut down and shutting down all of global shipping for a while, costing billions of dollars. And there's a whole story about it, And
Right, right.
but it was a small company that was compromised, and in many cases, I've seen law firms compromised. These are just maybe just a law firm of like four lawyers, because they don't have
Mhm.
time or the money to put in the security, or they don't even think about it. So um, I just yeah, there's a disconnect, like removing those services for the that are affordable, making it so that you can't get in if you don't have a certain amount of money, and then of course those smaller companies are the targets because they have access to the bigger companies.
Right. So, in that case,
Yeah.
what role can larger organizations or security vendors play in supporting? Like, how do you see, or
Mm.
what would you like to see larger organizations or security vendors to do for this thing?
I think that what they could do is provide cheaper offerings. I mean, I know it costs them money. It costs everyone money to create something like that. But to create like either a donation program or that would be the best for like nonprofits. I'm sure there's some way to make that work in an organization, or to to keep lower tier offerings, like really lower
Yeah.
tier. Like when I worked at a
Mhm.
nonprofit, I was paid very. I thought I was paid well. I was in my 20s, so I was paid 50,000 a year. It's not much. That's the most they could afford. I mean, I actually had to get that out of them. That was really hard. And I was a technical director, so they can't
Mhm.
afford anything. All the computers we got were donated. Um, Everything was donated pretty much, or like really subsidized. So security wasn't on the table. It wasn't an option. And whatever I knew was what I could give them basically. And at the time, I didn't know as much as I wanted to.
Mhm.
So yeah, if large companies could provide an easy pathway for nonprofits, small businesses to have this. The same enterprise security until maybe they reach a certain level and they can
Mhm.
start paying more or something.
True.
That's my ideal. And if I had a company, that's what I would do.
Makes sense, and that is one of the things I really like about Cloudflare. I'm not trying to promote any
Mm,
company or anything like that. We use Cloudflare,
yeah.
and they have very like basic pricing, which even covers many security areas like firewalls and DDoS stuff like that, which
Hmm.
are equally important for smaller companies, right? And they offer it. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense when you say maybe offer that lower price tier for smaller companies or startups as long as you can, so that it helps the overall ecosystem.
Yeah, and we need more like Cloudflare. Like Cloudflare, that's great that it's so cheap. I've seen it used in smaller organizations,
Hmm.
but then you're missing out on the really fancy things like incident response. How do you hire someone to come in when you've had an incident,
Right.
or like endpoint protection? You can use antivirus, but antivirus, we all know, not it's not the same as having proper endpoint protection from a company with threat researchers and stuff.
True, true, absolutely.
So yeah.
And yeah, that's a great way to end the security question section. Thanks, Josh, for the lovely conversation. Here are the 3 points which I gathered. The first one is threat researchers use threat hunting to learn about trends, correlations, to narrow focus of the research, and they use this information to watch for other threats and also to help bring awareness in organizations. Second one is threat research needs creative and out of the box thinking. By following a checklist, threat researchers often do not get often do not find out novel or unique attacks, and so it doesn't help. It doesn't aid in hunting threat hunting process. The last one is Gen AI platforms are a boon for researchers. They can quickly get started, learn about new attack vectors. At the same time, guardrails should be put in place to ensure that data is not leaked, or employees should be trained to learn about new Gen AI based or inspired attacks. Thank you. Now let's go to
Hmm.
the next section, which is rating security practices. So here I'll share like one security practice, and you need to rate them between 1 to 5, and 1 being the worst
Okay.
and 5 being the best. And you can add context, like why you are
Okay.
giving a particular rating. So let's start with the first one. Provide training and awareness programs to employees to help them identify and respond to potential security threats.
I think this is a 5. Like, I think it's extremely important. Your your employees and users of your systems are going to be the easiest way in, besides going for a small company that you contract out to,
Mhm.
and their users too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Let's go to the next one. Develop and regularly test an incident response plan to help quickly detect, respond to, and recover from security incidents.
I also think this is a 5. It's the other side of that, well, and threat hunting, but it's a 5 because if you've made backups and whatever of
Mhm.
things and you've got ransomed, you need to be able to know that it's going to work when you're trying to restore it. That's the most basic part. And then instant response and and um, and other items in this category, they're important. You need to be able to quickly recover, basically.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Or yeah.
Absolutely. The last security rating question is: DevOps practices are needed to move fast and deploy code to production. Security practices are not the most important right now.
I'm going to say 1. um, I know it doesn't change a lot because I've even written things very fast. I need to get it done, and I'm like, I'll deal with security later. But I've learned my mistakes, and most companies, though, they will do this. They'll write, build their thing, and you want to build fast, and you build the worst version you can,
Mhm.
and then improve upon it, and other things come later. The security should be always thought of as important, because later when you add security, you bolt it on. You're creating spaghetti code. You're creating issues, and when it's in production, you may not want to go and mess with it. So it's got to be thought throughout the whole process of a product.
That makes a lot of sense. So, last question before we end the podcast is: any reading recommendation that you have for our audience? It can be a blog or a book or a podcast or anything that you would want to recommend.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Interesting. Actually, this is not. This is a book that I'm reading currently, and it's not security related. I actually find I get a lot of value from non-security books. I have a ton of books, and I listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm going to give you 2 recommendations. One's a security
Okay.
thing, and I'm sure most people have heard of Darknet Diaries podcast. That's a great podcast with stories behind things that have happened or with interviews with people. And then the book that I'm reading, um, it's called The Changing New World Order by Ray Dalio, and it's more
Ah.
on economics and the
Mhm.
economy of the world, and like how the global currency of the world. It was British, and then it was Dutch, then British, and then the United States is the leader, and then now it's moving towards China. This gives you an indication of reading things like this. This book specifically is giving me a feel of like where society is going, and that also changes where security is going. So what to watch out for, you know.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing these two. What we'll do is when we publish the podcast, we'll also tag these. And I have
Mhm.
read Principles from Ray Dalio. That's also a
Oh
great
yeah,
book. Yeah. So when you
yeah,
said changing the new world, I was like, yeah, I have heard about it, but I have not read. I have bought, and it's in my bookshelf.
that's new.
I need to read. Uh, but
It's
yeah, that's a
great.
good recommendation for sure. Um,
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a great way to end the episode. Thank you so much, Josh, for joining us and
Cool.
sharing your learning with us.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. And to our audience, thank you for watching and see you in the next episode.